Hello, everybody. Good morning. Welcome to our webinar. We'll just give a few moments for a few extras to enter before we start in a moment. We've got a really exciting webinar this morning that we're really looking forward to sharing with you. Obviously, by the title, you can see that we're talking about engaging in the future within communities and collaboration, and how we can do this. We're going to be speaking to some really wonderful speakers this morning who are going to talk to us about some of the wonderful work that they've done, some of the wonderful work that we can do in the future, and exactly the tools and how we can go about it. So we're really looking forward to being able to share some really gems and nuggets of information on some of the great work that's been taking place. Also, as you're aware, that we've got a wonderful film that we've been able to produce alongside some of our partners that we're going to be premiering today. So we're really looking forward to being able to share all of these wonderful bits of information that we've got. So without any further ado, we'll be able to get in to speak to our first speaker. Oh, sorry, I do apologize. With further ado, I have one slide I missed. So just an introduction of who we are, that would help. I'm Timothy Lee Davis. I am the technical support manager here for London and the Southeast, which is LHC. As you can see, those of you that are aware of us, we are a national business. We cover the whole of the UK, and we have our different regions, whereas I work predominantly with the one in the bottom right corner, kindly been circled, which is London and the Southeast. And that's the team that's going to be sharing our information. We do have our regional teams throughout the rest of the country, covering Scotland, Wales, North and Central England, and the Southwest of England. If you'd like more information on those regions, obviously, please do get in touch. But we're really excited to be able to share with you the wonderful work and thoughts that we have about how we can really communicate and collaborate and really engage in the future. So we have got a wonderful set of speakers that are going to be able to speak with us today, including Richard from Wilmot Dixon, Pauline, and among others who you'll be able to meet throughout the day. We're going to be able to introduce those. And like I say, they're going to be sharing some wonderful nuggets of some of the great work that's been going on already in these within the communities and collaboration. And also, we're really going to be looking forward, as we say, to engage in the future and what we can do going forward to really champion this and make sure that we follow through on these wonderful intentions. So without any further ado, what we're going to do is introduce our first speaker, our keynote speaker, and that's going to be Richard Davidson from Wilmot Dixon. He's going to be taking us through social value through in community and collaboration. So we'd like to invite Richard to take us through into the first talk, please.
Well, thank you very much, Tim, and thank you to LHC. It's a delight to talk today to a number of you, and we are one of the LHC's contractors across the country, and yeah, very excited about this. So community and collaboration. Could I have my next slide, please? So I was been thinking about this. There's a lot in the press at the moment around social value, and I was thinking about this quite carefully, and I believe that social value is also part of the levelling up agenda. So bear with me. I think social value is about spending our time, effort, and money on raising aspirations, reducing imbalances, and creating opportunity for all our communities. And that is set out very clearly, I think, in what we do in social value. But also, if you read the levelling up papers, that's almost exactly verbatim. So I think regardless of any misquotes attributed to certain ministers for Brexit opportunities and government efficiencies, who we all might remember who his name is, that I argue that social value and community engagement are at the centre of all government procurement policy and funding. But this isn't a conversation about policy, even if those headlines might suggest that. So could I have my next slide, please, Shona? So I think this is about the conversation that we're creating. And we're all here gathered today. We work in the built environment, and we work quite specifically around community buildings. And these are buildings for the community. And I think it's really important, and a lot of people I've spoken to recently, what we've been talking about is making sure that whatever we do, it isn't being done to people. that they should just be grateful that we turned up and created something. Because actually the buildings or the environments that we're going to create are going to be there for a long time. So it's imperative upon us to make sure that we create a lasting positive legacy. And that really comes from when we have engagement and we create some ownership. So I've talked about this, our purpose. Some people might call this their value, but I think what's really powerful for us and what we've learned through collaboration and working in communities is we need to work with those people, and then we need to be true to what we've spoken about. So if I take my next slide, please. So I think I know that it isn't easy. It isn't easy to engage with the community sometimes. It isn't easy to generate social value. There's a lot of effort that we have to put in. I also think there are some people who don't trust us when we when we start to engage, and we know that sometimes can happen, particularly in planning. And development, wherever it might be, is always a hot topic. But actually what I find interesting is if we look differently at this through a different lens, is that we see a lot of communities are gathering for change. So we are now starting to see a number of local authorities engaging on wholesale estate regeneration and undertaking polls and doing that first bit of community engagement and saying, what is it about this community? How would you feel about change? We're also seeing local communities come together to save local buildings. And you quite often now start to read about communities working together for a community shop or a community pub or something else. So communities can galvanize together for positive change. And it's our job is to kind of engage with them. And that requires our effort, because many of the people on this call, we have great expertise in this environment. We are built environment professionals. We've got some great solutions that we can bring from one place and bring them in as ideas. But what I find keep coming back to is the effort is around listening. We have to listen so much harder than maybe we've done in the past. We need to understand those local needs. And then once we've done that listening, we then need to start pushing that into our buildings and into our procurement processes. Can I have the next slide, please? So I've got a little example here from a scheme. So this is Ian on the left. He's one of our building managers on a large scale project of regeneration in Barking and Dagenham at the Gascoigne estate. Ian's a lovely character. I love working with him. He's got a real heart. And part of that is he wants to help the community. So he was just engaging actually with a local food bank, which is all part of a kind of a broader program. We all understand why there are food banks at the moment. We'd like to challenge ourselves that maybe in a modern first world country, we shouldn't have to do that, but we have to do it. But what was more interesting about the food bank was actually the conversation that Ian had with the lady here on the right. So she runs a very small, very local charity providing hot meals to those who, for whatever reason, can't do that for themselves. So she was there collecting food, and Ian could have just been fairly transactional, providing her food to go and do her good deeds. What actually transpired is that she was creating these from really tiny community kitchens at the back of a small hall or at a local mosque. And she was really challenged some days to get those meals out. And what she really needed, her local need, was stability and space. This got Ian to thinking is that, well, we've got a great big site canteen that we're using Monday to Friday. Couldn't he convert that space or make it easier for this community charity to access that space? And what was really fascinating for me is that was a real example of how we could respond to local need. We could leverage our asset in quite a simple way. And it wasn't actually incredibly expensive. Now, there are some issues around insurance, there's some other issues around that, but developing a really hyper-local solution that, frankly, that example won't work everywhere else. And I think it's a really neat example of how he listened carefully to that community and thought, what could I do differently, rather than just rolling out a generic solution? Can I have the next slide, please? So one of the things that we talk a lot about in the social values sphere is about the outcomes. So we've talked about the need, let's understand those outcomes. And for us, a really big thing is jobs. And we're quite relentless at the moment in our pursuit of making sure that we understand the community, the outcomes from the community engagement. And it's about meeting those local specific needs. So I'm going to stick with Gascoigne Estate for the time being. A lot of our activities in community engagement are all measured through the TOMs. And they've been really helpful to understand the quantity of our impact. But something very specific that's happening here at the Gascoigne Estate is making sure that we employ apprentices. Now, rather than having a singular apprenticeship target number, it's actually been more important and more valuable to have really local apprentices. So you can see there with the leader of the council, Councillor Darren Rodwell, the three people on the right-hand side, they are all apprentices on that job, and they are all from that estate. Rather than bringing in an apprentice from halfway across London just to meet an arbitrary number, we've taken more time to work more closely with the community to make sure that we employ local apprentices. And actually for us, the measurement was on a hyper-local apprentice rather than just an apprentice. And that only really came about because we spent more time engaging up front. So if I can move on to the next one, please. So we talked about jobs and opportunities. I've actually featured here something from an LHC site, one of our jobs in Dunstable. Now, we could have just rolled out a generic apprenticeship scheme, which is really powerful and it's really valuable to the local authority. But actually, again, what we understood from a really early engagement was it wasn't specifically about, for them, a local apprenticeship target. It was actually about working with their young people who are neat. I'm assuming everyone understands that, but who are neat. And what we really needed to create there was a facility, a mechanism to help young people just get back onto the horse. They've dropped out of school for whatever reason. They've dropped out of employment and learning. So just throwing them straight back into a learning curriculum wasn't going to work. It wasn't going to deliver that local impact. So again, that hyper-local challenge was around working with the local authority and working to help people just get back into the rhythm, get back into the groove. And I was there at a visit a couple of weeks ago, and it was really, really interesting talking to one of the young people. And he said, "You've given me a purpose to get out of bed. And now soon I'll be ready to then think about what an apprenticeship scheme would be." He was a hard to reach young man. If it had just been advertising apprenticeships, we would never have met him. We would never have given him a leg up. And I think that that's testament really to the local engagement, early engagement we have with the authority. And also my point there is that there isn't one size that fits all. And that's where our time comes. So if I can move to the next one, which is very, very useful. It is about investing our time. And I think what's really important here, and this is a scheme in Westminster called Harrow Road. And I'm going to move into what we talk about here when it comes to community engagement in planning. What's really important is that we needed to go and meet the people on the ground, be there at the right time that suits them. We were trying to foster support of the local community. And as you can see here, we've got a great big building project right next to an existing building. You know, we needed to go and see those people. It was no good saying, come and have a look at the planning drawings down at Town Hall. That isn't going to work. We're not going to reach them. Then they're just not going to come. So the change in approach for this scheme and working with the architects and having a lovely conversation about it the other day was, we were talking about how did we engage with those people. So some examples here was, we knew that there were kind of music festivals or food festivals going on in the area, a Saturday or a Sunday, a bank holiday weekend. So the whole idea was to have a pop-up stall there at a point when more of that local community are engaged. They want to listen, they're interested in what's happening in the local environment. So that's what we did. And actually it provided really powerful and valuable feedback. And the same happened when there were food markets or other markets, grabbing people at the right time when they're ready, working with them, being in their space when they want to engage. That doesn't mean we didn't still do town hall meetings. We actually moved a lot of it online. It didn't mean that we didn't have very specific design groups, because we did. And we had Zoom sessions and we had feedback and we had websites. We tried to deploy all of the tools available rather than just relying on one route. And I think that's what we've learned, is that to get good quality engagement for the people in the location to understand what could benefit them, what they could get out of it, how they can influence the design, meant that we had to invest our time up front. But we had a team that also recognized that that's what was valuable, that when you do invest your time, when you do bring people on board, you actually get some really interesting results. So one of the really interesting things from this is that if you see on the left-hand side of the picture, well, my screen on the left-hand side of the picture, you can see a canal, and the Canal and Rivers Trust really were looking to try and engage, bring a bit more active frontage, show people that they could go down the canal path, that it was there's a community within a community. So this scheme was designed to make sure that it didn't feel like you were going down some dead end to get to the canal, that we opened things up. What that created then was an opportunity for a bit more cohesion around the community. But again, that only really came about because we had some other stakeholders in the professional team who said, don't forget, we need to speak to the Canal and Rivers Trust. Don't forget, we need to speak to the streetscape team. Don't forget. And I think what was really powerful on this scheme, and is still in effect now, because this is a live photograph from 2 days ago. And what's really powerful is that because we went to that effort, we're now still continuing to kind of get the benefits of those investments. So I can have the next slide, please. So this is the community space in the middle of that hub, that kind of large street that runs up to the canal from the Harrow Road. This was all worked in with the community, and what they were looking for was somewhere where they felt they had breathing space. So that was really loud and clear from the connections. They also wanted to make sure that the community nursery that was existing on the site was looked after and responded to the local community needs, as well as having a temporary place to live. There was also a demand for some sort of community office, co-working space. So that was built in, and it was really a case of, let's make sure those community facilities respond to that community, not just a generic community. And again, that takes time, but really pays back. Though many of those people are engaged. We couldn't get rid of some of their concerns around dust during construction, but we could explain to them the methodologies we were going to undertake way in advance of starting the construction activities. So at least we had an opportunity to allay some fears. But it was all about investing in those stakeholders, giving the community what the community asked for. It was all about bringing that whole team approach. So if I can have the next one, please, Shona. So let's talk about guidance. And when I talked at the beginning of this, and maybe my theme all the way through has been about understanding the local need, not adopting a one-size-fits-all approach. We still need some guidance. And the Social Value Act has been enacted for 10 years now. The Social Value Portal's got some really great tools there that help us understand what could be done, and potentially through the national TOMs is understand the pounds and pence value of them. But I think it's actually taking us time to find some really good practical working solutions, taking some of those numbers, some of those practices, and getting them put into procurement, getting them written into contracts. Because if something isn't written in a contract, it won't necessarily happen. So the other thing for me is to make sure we don't just focus on a pounds and pence. I talked about it earlier. It's about making sure we deliver those outcomes that respond to the local need, rather than just chasing a great big number. And the other thing I just chose to show here is the UK Green Building Council last week released a new guidance document helping you to understand how to embed social value and engagement into the contracts, into our projects. And actually, I think it's really powerful. So given that it only came out last week, many of you won't be aware of it. So if I go to the last slide, please, Shona. So how do we leverage great social value and community engagement? I've kind of put it here, really. It's about working smarter. We want high quality community engagement, not just generic. It relies on the whole team coming together. It really relies on having a strong vision from the project leaders. And I'm talking right back at the beginning, kind of pre-business case. Let's be really clear on our vision, and then let's establish that in our contracts. We know that when we do it well, we get great benefits. And actually, if I go back to my example with the canteen, that was a really simple solution which could deliver an incredible amount of value. So my 4 points there is you must engage early to establish what the outcomes are. Define the measure of success on those outcomes rather than just using a generic table. Plan those activities and then deliver on those rather than just ad hoc. And lastly, lots of my colleagues in social value said, be patient because it doesn't always work the first time. So thank you, that's me done, and hopefully on time. Over to you, Tim.
Thank you so much for that, Richard. That was wonderful, so insightful, and some real wonderful nuggets for us that we appreciate. I was just thinking that, like you said, be patient. We know nothing comes good to those who aren't willing to wait, and it's really worth the effort that you talked about to create that positive change. I thought there's some wonderful nuggets there, especially when you talked about how that one size doesn't fit all with that lovely example of the scheme. And so it's great to see, obviously, one of our appointed contractors who work alongside us at the LHC is really putting into practice, not just words in the air and thoughts, but we're really seeing the value that it can bring. And so it's wonderful work that you're doing over there at Wilmot Dixon. We really appreciate you taking the time to share that with us. There was something you mentioned in there, especially about the apprenticeships and jobs for young people, something that's close to my heart, being a former apprentice that started my construction career in that regard. And there's some wonderful work that we know that goes on with young people. And this is something that we are so passionate about engaging with as well at LHC. And that brings us in lovely to our next speaker, Polly, who is going to be talking to us about the wonderful work that she does with We Rise Brixton and the community impact work that they have. So if you could share with us, Polly, we'd love to hear from you.
Thank you. Thanks, Tim. Okay, so I'm Polly Wadsworth, and I was an architect for over 20 years. And now I work as the operations director at social enterprise in Brixton called We Rise. And I'm particularly excited to be here today with Ruth, who's with me, because we're going to show you a film at the end called Engage the Future, which we made, which was commissioned by LHC. So it's a very typical example of the sort of work we do at We Rise. So it's very, very apt for the conference today. Okay, so next slide. So I'd really like to talk to you about how to engage young people and give them a voice today. I'd like to talk to you about how we do it at We Rise and the specific projects that we delivered for our clients. Young people are at the heart of what we do. These projects that we do, they engage young people and they give them opportunities to have their voices heard. I think you probably gathered from Richard's talk just now that people quite often find it hard to reach young people and they see them as hard to reach. Therefore, it's not because young people don't have things to say or things to contribute. It's just that, like all of us, they want meaningful opportunities, and like us, they deserve to be paid for those opportunities, for their input and their contributions to things. So just because you're doing something that affects them doesn't mean that they should give you their time, and it doesn't mean that they aren't interested in what you're doing. It just means that you need to work a little bit harder, which I think also Richard talked about, a little bit harder and be maybe more considerate in how you reach them. Young people often are promised things by people in positions of power. They often don't end up receiving them. Some of the reasons for this are that some people doing the promising, they don't really value the ideas or the opinions of young people, and they often think that they know better. Also, being very cynical, engagement is often just a tick box exercise. It's for the people asking the questions to get to the next level, and sometimes the people asking the questions aren't from the community, so they aren't genuinely interested in what the young people have to say. Young people are pretty savvy. They can smell a sales pitch a mile off. So you really have to, there are lots of ways that you can engage really well. And I'll talk about some of the ones that we do at We Rise now. So if you just go on to the next slide, please. So this is the We Rise team. Our founder, Abigail and James, are handily in white in this photo. We were founded to bridge the gap between the world of work and school, and it's a big gap for a lot of the disadvantaged young people in the community that we are based out here in South London. And if you go to the next slide, please. And this is our first cohort of young people that we worked with, and this is our mission. Our mission is to empower young people to create successful futures. And we work with young people aged 15 to 19 from our local state schools in Lambeth. Most of them come from a position of socioeconomic disadvantage. A lot of them are pupil premium, which means that they've been eligible for free school meals at some point in their school life. That often, because we're in South London, means that a lot of the people we work with are Black or people of colour, and they therefore also suffer from racial disadvantage. This means that they don't often get the opportunities that their middle class counterparts have, because their parents don't have networks to help them make those connections in the wider world of work. And they're not exposed to inspiring and fantastic work opportunities. They're not networked. State schools, as I'm sure a lot of you know, are very focused on the exam system, and it is our education system. They don't have the resources and the time to create really good inspirational career opportunities. These young people are amazing. They're really, really talented. They're really ambitious. We feel really passionately about them, and they really deserve to be given opportunities to reach their full potential, and they really deserve to have their opinions heard. So that's where we come in. We exist to empower young people. We exist to upskill them in the world of work, and therefore they can more easily get to the next level. And importantly, really importantly, which is very relevant today, this works both ways. So we have this amazing cohort of young people like Ruth, and we connect organizations to those young people, so they can invite them to the table to hear their views, and they can help organizations address lack of diversity in their workforce, but really importantly, they can give them opportunities to be engaged in processes. Okay, so next slide, please, Shannon. And it's a win-win situation. Don't underestimate how much you and your colleagues will get out of making a difference. I mean, I really can't emphasize, having come from the world of architecture and then started to work with young people, every time we run a project, I am blown away by the kids that we get on it, and I always think they're better than the last, although I'm sure they can't be. But they're just fantastic, and really don't underestimate them. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so the win-win situation, just think about that. It's an equation. It's an empowerment equation, and where both sides balance. So while our priority really predominantly is young people that take part in our projects, and we want to bridge that school to work gap, the clients and commission our projects are gaining high quality pieces of work with the additional benefit that they know they're helping make a difference, and they see the impact on what they're doing when they're engaged in our projects, and they give the young people who work with the opportunities. So this is our unique selling point, our unique selling power, is that sort of that win-win situation. The client gets something out of it, and the young people get something out of it. And we have a WeDrive's book, The Work Experience Revolution, by our founder. So if you want to find a lot more about that school to work gap and why it's really necessary for organizations like yours to reach out, then look it up in the book. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so how do we do it? So there are really three main strands to the work that we do at WeRise. Our core business is high quality work experience projects and workshops. We also do professional mentoring, platforms to give young people a voice is another element of our projects, and the perfect combination is number 1 and number 3 on that list. So the film that you're about to see that Ruth's going to introduce very much demonstrates giving young people this amazing work experience opportunity, and also giving them a voice, a platform to have their voices heard. Just to talk a little bit about our model, so that I can explain exactly how we do it. We run our work experience projects for groups of about 10 young people we recruit from local state schools. They're aged 15 to 19, and we deliver the project over the course of 5 days. We run our projects for real clients. So these are we actually did some projects for ITV with our Gen Z team here. You can see some pictures of it. We created some adverts for the ITV competitions branch, and they were shown on Good Morning TV. So we worked with Alison Hammond there, and Andy Peters, and the way that it works is our clients come to us with a brief. So in this case, ITV came with we had this competition, and the young people we plan, recruit, and young people taking part, and then we work with them over quite an intense program of 5 days. We coach them, but the young people do the research, they brainstorm, they come up with the creative ideas, and they pitch, they present that back to the client for sign off, and then they deliver it, they film it, they work with the professionals to set up the shots, to script it, everything, and then they edit it, all done with the support of professionals in the industry, so that what we get is a high quality piece of work. the experts teach the young people as they're going. And then really importantly, there's a lot of presentation back to the client. So the young people have the experience of presenting, and they learn networking skills, which we all know are kind of absolutely key to getting ahead. But very, very importantly, we pay the young people who come on our projects. We pay, and we have a celebrating meal at the end. And that's a really key point that I'll come back to. So next slide, please. We've also just a couple of other projects we created. So we don't, all our projects are bespoke for each individual client. We created an advert for AGK. We also did a recruitment advert for Haringey Council, because they wanted to reach diverse young people in order to fill their apprenticeship places. And so the best way to do that is to work with a group of diverse young people to create your advert, to write it so that it appeals. And next slide, please. And here's the project that we're about to see at the end. This is our Engage the Future, some making shots of Engage the Future that we did with LHC, which was absolutely brilliant. And the next slide, please. And workshops. We do workshops, which are often for clients as well. So Brixton My Creative Future was a workshop we did in partnership with LHC, which was to find out what young people would want in Brixton, to keep them in Brixton, to make it a place that they would want to work in the creative industries. And we've also done a really exciting project for Squire and Partners Architects, where we helped design their winter windows with a group of local young people. And next slide, please. And another element, I won't talk too much about this, we do research projects. Young people make brilliant researchers. Again, we have a brief from a client. We work with Ipsos, the consultant research organisation. We create surveys, and then young people go out and actually ask members of the public and report back on they evaluate and report back. So it's a really fantastic experience for the young people involved. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so it's really important to talk about the impact. What impact does it have on the young people who take part? And this is just a quote on the screen from Lanaya about our work experience that work experience project she took part in. What's the impact and how young people empowered through doing our projects? Reese will talk a little bit about it from her own experiences in it shortly, but basically what happens is the young people who come on our projects, they're exposed to creative project-based work experience. It's really different from what they're doing at school. It's not something they get at school, and therefore it's really valuable for them. They're given control, they're valued, their ideas are what drives and makes it happen. But also we have a lot of fun doing our projects. We're not serious. It is a bridge between school and work. And very, very importantly as well, the young people who come on the projects, they meet people from the real world of work. They meet professionals. They learn the soft skills about how you behave. They learn about networking, and they practice talking to people who are not their teachers, who aren't their peers, who aren't their family, they're professionals, and they're really valued for who they are. And that comes at the end, particularly when they present their project back to the client. And really, even more importantly, which is very much the case for Ruth, is that they have a fantastic piece of work at the end of it that they have to show for themselves what they've done, and they use this for their personal statements. It helps them move forwards, and it helps them in applications. It helps them in their CVs and move up the ladder and towards the world of work. And as I mentioned before, very importantly, they get paid. Okay, next slide, please. And I just wanted to give you an example of what the impact can be. So this is Alexia on the right here, and this is Ellie with the glasses on her head on the left-hand shot. And we ran a sort of meet and greet professionals workshop with these young people. And Alexia, at the end of that workshop, Ellie here is a quantity surveyor, and she works for a developer called London Square, and they kindly came in. And Ellie came and talked to all the young people about what being a quantity surveyor was. Alexia was so inspired by talking to Ellie and meeting her that at the end of that session, I saw her writing on the palm of her hand, quantity surveyor. And I asked her, and I said, how come you're writing that on your hand? And she said, well, I want to be one. And so she went away, and she's now applying to be a quantity surveyor at university. And it was from that very short workshop where she had that interaction with Ellie, and it's basically made a massive difference in terms of her career prospects, and it's just broadened her horizons to think, okay, that I never knew that, and I want to do that now. So that's a really prime example of how you can make a difference in not a great long interaction. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so here are lovely LHC clients for our film. What do our clients get? In summary, and I'm sure Shona and Tim can say if there's anything else I've missed or if they don't agree with me, but our clients get to make a difference, and they get to give young people opportunities, and they get to hear what they have to say, and they often tap into the creativity of the young people, exactly as what happened in the film you're about to see. And we create something for our clients that appeals to a wider audience than they would normally reach. It gives young people an opportunity to have a voice and to get their opinions out there. And we work really closely with our clients to make sure that we deliver against their brief. Every project is bespoke. Very importantly, we take the pain out of having to reach excuse me, and work with young people. If you're not very experienced at doing that, and you're not very embedded in a particular community, we save time and effort, and we generally, I feel, deliver much better results because of that. And also, as I mentioned earlier, a lot of our clients are looking for more diversity in their workforce, and they're doing it because they know that engaging with the young people that we work with here in South London from diverse backgrounds, they're therefore going to appeal to diverse workforces in the future. Okay, so next slide. I just wanted to quickly mention this is Idris waiting for his mentoring session. We do professional mentoring, which is really crucial. It's an add-on, often comes off the back of some of our projects. We connect professionals who we train to a high level as mentors, and we connect them with young people who have various career ideas but don't quite know how to do it, and also just general they give them general advice about going into the world of work. Okay, next slide, please. And really, just as another emphasis, that just don't forget the empowerment works both ways. By giving young people the experience and your time in a meaningful way, there's an awful lot to get out of it. And this was a message that I got from one of our mentors not long after he'd started his sessions with one of our mentees, and it was just really sums up what it's like. I actually felt like I was making a difference even after one session, which I think really sort of says it all. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so then really importantly, our third projects, which as I mentioned are often combined with our film projects, not always though, we do projects where young people have platforms to have their voices heard. Here are a few of them. Engage the Future, as you can see at the bottom right there, is the film that we've made for LHC. We've also done things for Lambeth Council. We did a youth takeover about the Brixton, Liverpool neighbourhoods where young people were not filling in the survey. The survey wasn't reaching them, so we had a team of people. Lambeth engaged us to create an Instagram campaign that reached them, and they did lots of going into schools and talking. So that was a very active way of reaching young people. We've also done some funded film projects. Resonances of 1981 was a group of young people we worked with, created a film about their views on the 1981 Brixton uprisings and what it meant to them and what they knew about it, what they didn't know about it, and how it's still affecting them today. Discovering Empowerment was giving young people an opportunity to talk about how empowered, or in some cases not empowered, they feel with the way that the world works today. And then following on from that, they created quite a light-hearted, fun film called Do You Judge a Book by Its Cover, which is on our YouTube channel if you want to watch it. It's very entertaining. Okay, so then how do you engage young people? So this is my final slide before Ruth takes over for say her few words. How do you engage young people and find out their opinions? Give them something in return. for what they've used. Give them worthwhile opportunities that empower them beyond just asking them for their opinions. Value them, pay them. As Richard mentioned, I'm really pleased you mentioned this. One size doesn't fit all. There isn't one solution. It's very bespoke. And really importantly, work with organisations who know how to reach young people and what works for them. And I'd really like to add to that, work with organisations within a community that already exists. Don't parachute in your favourite engagement organisation and expect everyone in the community already to just jump and go, oh yes, we'll come to your forum and talk to you, and then we'll never hear from you again. Really try and engage with the organisations that are already there. Okay, over to Ruth.
Hi, I'm Ruth Alabachu and I'm 18 and I'm an A-level student at Lara Trade Sixth Form. I was actually a part of the Engage the Future work experience team who created the film you're about to see. Together with the help of WeRise, we researched, we designed and created a film in 5 days, and we met a group of architects and explored what a good design is. We would like the design of our houses and communities to allow us to actually share our opinions, as well as we also interrogated the architects about what usually happens during the planning process and how much input young people usually have in it. We then designed a film to express how important it is for organizations to engage with us more. We also wrote a script and planned the shots before working with a professional film crew and editor to create a film. We wanted to tell you that it's really important to engage us in the design process when new buildings and spaces are being developed in a particular way. It's so important to include us from the beginning, because then all we will see is buildings being built and we're just in shock, because I have lived in Brixton for basically all my life and seen things being built, and I'm always surprised to see them being built, because the invitations to be part of the conversation has never really reached me. So making this film has really brought out why it's important to consider our views. Being part of this project has really empowered me to use it actually in my portfolio for my application. Therefore I actually made it into film school, and I'm excited to be off to my first choice next year. So yeah, thank you.
You're on mute, Tim.
I apologize. That was fantastic. Thanks so much for that, Polly and Ruth. It was so wonderful to hear those wonderful thoughts. So I won't comment any further. We'll go straight into the film that we'll be able to show you Ruth's great work along with the team at WeRise and the others.
Young people don't get our voices heard.
We don't get to decide the spaces and places that are around us.
Young people not being part of the conversation about local projects has resulted in designs that aren't used to their full potentials. Examples of this include dark, unsafe alleyways, unwelcoming places, and overcrowded areas with little seating.
What brings me joy in life is having creative freedom and not being restricted in my creativity. I like doing music, books, like reading and then drawing.
What I like doing is I like gardening. I like to plant in my pot plants. I'm not stressed and I'm in my own world.
I like cooking because I like cooking for people.
I like doing sports because it means I can do it with my friends or my sister.
I like going to the park with my friends and being active.
Going out with my friends, like having a space where we can talk.
I enjoy art, baking, and cooking.
Places such as gardens, communal seating areas, and facilities that accommodate our hobbies and needs as young people.
often architects and clients and even the council talk very quickly because they understand what they're talking about and they know the project because they've been working on it for 6 months, a year, 2 years maybe. Whereas suddenly you're talking to loads of people who, they know it's important, but they need to be able to understand it from almost like first principles. It's really important that consultation isn't about, we're going to build this, do you like that white bit? Because someone might go, oh, forget the white bit, what about all the rest of it? I don't like the rest of it. So what questions you ask and trying to get people's input before we put that yellow bit there, why should we start with the yellow bit?
So this is, especially for young people, this would be the perfect way of communicating what you want the site to be or the location to look like.
Firms have these Instagrams and these Snapchats and things, so definitely it has become a lot more accessible to young people and a lot easier for us as architects to reach out to them and to communicate with them in a way that's not daunting and that's not, condescending. So that is one way that the consultation could start to happen.
And it's important for the younger generation themselves that they're going to be the users of these buildings and projects. It's just right that they should have a say in it.
We need to be thinking more generously about the spaces and places we make, and I think you guys, young people, can help us make a more beautiful world.
We want these new buildings to inspire us and make us feel a part of our community.
We will help to improve the lifespan of buildings.
We bring in more ideas.
Our ideas are original and different.
We are the architects of the future. We are the ones who will be using the areas you design.
We will help you design buildings that are sustainable, financially and environmentally.
And if you have young people on board, then they bring the rest of the community with them and take the initiative to get involved.
Wonderful. Now, wasn't that brilliant? It shows you some of the great work that has taken place by our young people that we was able to engage with the help of We Rise, and some really lovely thoughts there from Polly, and highlighting some of the wonderful work that they do. We'd also really like to thank Neve Murphy from GPAD, Phil Wren from Wren Architecture, Mark Marshall and Shidan Hagos from Dakin Marshall, and Jack Morton from LTS Architects, who you saw there in the film, who partook. And I can tell you firsthand you saw the team that we was able to go down at the start of the week. As Polly mentioned, this took place over just 5 days. And from going down on the Monday and seeing these young people engaging with the architects and getting the brief to when they presented it to us on the Friday, the amount of confidence that they had and the effect that it had on them, and also the architects. I spoke firsthand to a number of the architects that really loved the opportunity that it had. So it shows us again some of the wonderful work that's really taking place. Really stood out that Polly mentioned the young girl Alexia who wrote to become a QS on her hand, and it just shows us we never really understand the impact that we can have, and there is so much wonderful work that's going on. So the question is really, how can we make the most of this and really embrace ourselves into this community engagement to engage and collaborate? So now we're going to have a panel discussion. So we're going to have an opportunity to talk to the people that are here for us to display the wonderful work that they're doing. So we've had a couple that you've heard from already. We're going to give an opportunity for those that are going to be new on the panel to introduce themselves, so that you're not just hearing from them fresh, you know who is speaking. So maybe if we could ask Savannah, if you could maybe introduce yourselves.
Hi there, I'm Savannah de Savary. I'm the founder and CEO of Built ID. Our community engagement platform, Give My View, enables people to engage on their own terms and to have a meaningful impact from the comfort of their couch, on the move, basically within their own life and what works for them.
Thank you, Savannah. That's great. We'll be hearing more from you. And Megan Carter, if you could probably introduce yourself, sorry.
No worries. Hi, I'm Megan Carter. I'm head of major projects for Portsmouth City Council.
Lovely, thank you. And we have Charlotte Kirkbride with us as well.
Hello, I'm from Construction Youth Trust, and we are a charity that works to inspire and support young people to reach their full career potential in the construction built environment sector.
Lovely, thanks, Charlotte. And last but by no means least, David Outquist.
Hi everyone, I'm Dave. Work for Locality. Locality is a England-wide network for place-based community organisations. We run a whole range of programmes and bespoke support aiming to make communities more resilient and strong and a more beautiful world, to quote the We Rise film. And we're particularly here because we partner with LHC to be the independent grant distributor for their community benefit fund in London and the South East.
Wonderful. Thank you, David. So we've really got you guys together to really display and share with us some of the wonderful work that's going on, and really to give us insight into some of the obstacles that we face. So one of the first questions that we're going to speak about with this in mind is really to understand, why do we feel that some of the schemes fail to be fully used or even embraced by their local communities? Maybe Charlotte, could you give us your thoughts on this?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm actually going to completely echo everything that Polly said in her fantastic presentation, is that in our experience, schemes fail when you go in and you're just a bit of a flash in the pan, where the local community doesn't trust you, they don't think you're going to stick around, and absolutely they think you're giving promises that ultimately you're going to break. And we work with young people as well, and it's really, we go in a really local place-based way, working with local schools, colleges and other community organisations to build those relationships, which take a long time. It's not just 5 minutes, it's over years. And so I would absolutely echo Polly saying that when you go in somewhere, don't bring in somebody from a different area. Really embed yourself with who's already doing that great work and let them do some of the hard work for you.
Yeah, that was a wonderful point, wasn't it? If you've got those people in place, then take advantage of their expertise. David, obviously you're very well versed in this. What do you feel are sometimes the issues that
I think what Charlotte's just said might be repeated a few times in these answers. But I mean, I was just thinking about some kind of engagement processes that hadn't kind of gone right, and I will talk quite a lot from our own experience, because we do get involved in doing some of these engagement processes. But I mean, I can think of one where it was the client was a kind of a housing organisation in a borough in London, and they, what they were engaging or consulting around was quite a extremely controversial scheme, really, or overall development, and I won't name the particular partners in this, but it kind of, it became quite political. I think the issue was that the client really hadn't quite got the depth of the community's kind of feeling about what the proposals were, and they would really have benefited in that case, I think, from partnering with a kind of local organisation or agency, had a deeper understanding and was that embedded organisation. So there's something there about kind of that depth of understanding. Had they started from a slightly different place, they might have got a better outcome. And the other thing I would flag as well, perhaps, that where things don't quite go right is the timing, really, because obviously if you're running a major scheme, developers have to run, project manage to a certain time, and sometimes there's a mismatch between that and community organizations, those kind of local organizations who are there have been there a long time and there for the long term. And I think what the call to action there for me is to count for an independent kind of broker to be somehow smoothing out those timing differences, because it's not that clients and developers clearly don't want to be taking loads and loads of there's limits in terms of how much patience and how much time you can put in, but I sort of independent brokers can kind of smooth that out, really, and get to that win-win, which a couple of previous speakers have talked about, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, definitely. Thank you. We don't want it to be an afterthought, do we? This is the whole point of the collaboration. It was mentioned in the video, something to be from the start. Savannah, did you have any thoughts on some of the issues that are faced?
Absolutely. So echoing what the others said, I think there really is this trust deficit especially with young people. I think what we often confuse as apathy, they're just not interested in engaging with decision makers and being involved. That is just such a sort of, I suppose, a falsehood. What it really is that they feel disenfranchised. They think, what's the point? No one's going to listen to me. No one's going to actually do anything about it. It's a foregone conclusion. And when we, I'm obviously going to speak about what I do later, but what we really found as we delved into it is so many people feel that way. It's not just young people. A lot of people who aren't part of that sort of privileged, articulate minority who tend to be, from professional backgrounds, and they tend to have had a lot of, sort of privilege in their lives. A lot of other demographics, not just younger people, think, I do care and I'm receptive to change, but what's the point? They just don't have that trust. And it's not enough to just, I completely agree with what everyone said. And not only have you got to activate those local community groups and people to engage and drive that change, but also what you have to do is you can't just go in, think you can engage once and then leave again, because you've got to build that trust over time. We've got a lot of mending to do. And I think the second point that often when it comes to specifically why often we find facilities, in your question, is that they're underutilized. We do these projects and they don't actually end up being used. And that's often what you hear is a sort of a complaint from landlords, is that, people say they want and need something, and then it's not utilized properly once it's delivered. And I think that's often is because we're not actually listening to them with enough depth. Because often these facilities, these amenities, they aren't of value in and of themselves, but actually just as vehicles for something like community activation, for integration. So actually, if you don't achieve that intangible value that the community is looking for, and it's very hard to do if you don't actually enable them to be in the driving seat with you, if you just come and do it, paternalistically from outside their community, then it doesn't matter how shiny and fancy that facility is. It's not actually achieving what they really wanted, which was a deliverable which is intangible. And most often we find what it is it's combating social isolation. It's creating a sense of community.
Fantastic. And we're going to hear further about what you do as well. Thank you, Savannah. And maybe finally on this, Polly, if you can share with us some of your thoughts. Obviously, you come from a background in architecture and the wonderful work you do. It was highlighted in the film. What do you think are some of the reasons why these don't get fully embraced by the local communities, these schemes?
One thing that I suspect is an issue is that there's no long-term planning for the lifetime of the building. So spaces might be created, they may be created really successfully with the community, but then actually if there's no plan in place for how they're managed and run and funded, then what's the point really? They just sit as an empty space, and it's a bit of a travesty.
Yeah, that's it. So it's really key, exactly what we're talking about, isn't it? The engagement and collaboration from the start. We've mentioned it's a lot of effort. We need to be patient, but we see the payoff. So with that in mind, if we go to our second discussion point that we're going to, maybe we can ask Megan if you could give us what are some of the best examples that you've seen of client-led engagement.
Yeah, and obviously being a client ourselves, might be there's an interesting position to come at it from. So I really love the Build Up program, which saw sort of young people physically building things, classrooms, outdoor spaces. It was a really amazing piece of community engagement. Young people, their community, really taking ownership. I saw a really interesting piece of work around a font being created for Digbeth community, which is a really interesting way of kind of binding people to an identity or something really visual that they could get on board with. It was their font. That was a really interesting thing. And I'd never really thought of fonts like that, but that was a really interesting piece of work. We're really lucky actually in Portsmouth that we are, one of our programs, the Horatio and Leamington program, is up for an IESE Public Sector Transformation Award with their program of engagement events that they've done. They've done everything: street galleries, play and plants, they've done naming sessions, they've done things inside sort of derelict buildings where they've lit it up and showed how lighting can really create safer spaces. They've done door knocks of over 1,000 residents, 82% of which they, physically got to stand and have a chat on the door. So a really, amazing piece of work coming from the Horatio and Leamington teams in Portsmouth. We've also had a really interesting piece of work around coastal defence schemes, and particularly in Portsmouth, again, we've got a fantastic visitor centre, because flood defences, although people kind of understand the need for them, they're huge in infrastructure pieces, and being a majority of an island, our city is an island, it's quite hard to sort of explain what that's going to look and feel like. So bringing that to life has been something really amazing. But yeah, we're up for an award, so it's quite exciting, and use that as one of our good examples.
Oh, fantastic. Well, we look forward to see what happens with that. And some of the great work that we mentioned that, David, you do with Locality as one of our community benefit funds. You must have seen some good examples of community-led engagement that you can share with us?
Yeah, I think what I kind of would flag up is, again, we'll come back to some continuing themes, I think, but example where partnerships really important. I'm just thinking of a piece of work we partnered on in a small area within the borough of Islington, Caledonian Road, and there was it's a piece of engagement to inform a plan for that local area, including the kind of built environment, but more quite a comprehensive plan. And the key was, I think, a kind of genuine partnership where the client was sort of client-led, but actually I think the client in this case being the local authority, took a step back really, and brought in a kind of independent agency, but with links locally. In our case, we've got a network of local members, all over London, but also engage very much with like all the kind of different youth organisations locally, and all the different sectoral organisations. So that kind of combination of working partnership, taking a step back, and being kind of quite hyper local as well. And the other thing, if it's okay, if I can carry on just a bit, the thing about the longer term and investing time, there's a we're working in a greenfield development in Cambridgeshire actually, and it's with a kind of local family developer, and they really have invested time because they've kind of brought us and others in over a period of several years while the scheme builds up. And effectively, it's a bit like kind of creating a community from scratch. But that's really a good example of, really somebody, a client and the local authority in this case, is sort of investing time and indeed, considerable resources in this over some period of time. And maybe on this one as well, just going back to Richard's piece at the beginning, there's loads of good stuff in there. And I think the example of the use of the site, the canteen, as for food bank, it's kind of, that's something about keep it simple, being positive, saying yes to something rather than finding reasons it can't happen, and being quite creative, really. So those are a few examples. Actually, I might just quickly say, if I can, Tim, about addressing the kind of looking at some of the kind of engagement through the lens of diversity and equity and inclusion, and reflecting on some of the things we funded through the LHC Community Benefit Fund. Sometimes that's kind of just grant funding to general good stuff that's going on in communities, interesting projects. But in some cases, you can really draw the line between what we're investing funds in and the main business of LHC. So the kind of example that comes to mind is a project we funded in Southwark, which was focused really on minoritized or racialized young communities, young people from those communities who were kind of underrepresented in the built environment industries, really. And this was a kind of mentoring and a training program, a placement program over the summer that really got young people in. A bit like the Polly's explanation of what's going on with Re-Rise was really like, and that was really successful in turning young people on to and getting them to understand more about the kind of careers in the built environment. So that's kind of that's quite a nice one.
That's a good segue, leads us in. While we talk with young people, another one of our partners that we use do great work, Construction Youth Trust, who kind of says the name on the tin. Charlotte, would you like to share with us some examples of client-led community engagement?
Yeah, definitely. I think where we do a lot of work with councils and some bigger clients. Where we find that the engagement really starts to work is where, and this is what Richard was saying, it's that there's a leader at the top, there's someone who's really pushing the social value, who's really holding it front and center. So when you've got supply chains and companies on frameworks where they've got these social value commitments, that they're being connected to people who can be a vehicle to help move it forward. You know, we've done a lot of work about how, especially where there are companies where they don't have the luxury to have somebody who has the time to think about how their organization can achieve their social value, but they've got the real impetus, connecting us with them and us being that vehicle for them as well. Obviously, I've got vested interest in that, but that's why we do what we do, and it's why we work in the way that we work, to enable that connection between the professionals and the community in our young people. And it's when, you know, I think it's always about individuals. When you've got people who really care and they come together and they can galvanize everybody else, that's when we really get into that collaborative working that achieves something and stops being the thoughts in the areas you said earlier and becomes something really tangible. That's what we really enjoy doing.
Yeah, and that's fantastic. And obviously, if you'd like to know more about locality or construction you trust, then please get involved with us. And then finally, maybe on this one of examples we've seen of client-led engagement, we could ask Savannah, do you have any examples you can share?
Absolutely. Yes, I'm conscious of I don't want to sort of give too many before the case studies I'll show in a minute, but absolutely I'll give some. So I think what's really powerful is when you actually we call it design thinking. So what we do is, before we ever launch a project, we work with our clients to figure out what is actually financially feasible and viable from a design and planning perspective for the community to influence. Because don't ask them about something if it's a foregone conclusion. And don't ask them, you know, would you like to see A, B, or C if B and C are both out of scope? So what it actually enables you to do is get past community engagement being a sort of a comms exercise and actually move it towards being around co-design, to be around actually enabling diverse voices to be involved in the change-making process. And that's why those design thinking workshops we insist that we need the architect there, the landscape architect, the planner, anyone who needs to be involved in actually signing off on a decision. They need to be there to actually engage in that process. And the results are really powerful across, and we do this for every project we do. So every project kind of is a great case study of that, I think. But what you see is influence decisions ranging from actually understanding exactly how the outdoor space should be used, delivering the facilities the community want there. And these don't necessarily always have to be things that have a huge impact on the developer or the council's budget. Often what was quite popular, we found after COVID, is actually fenced in dog parks. And these are really, all you have to do is put up some fencing, you know, a little water fountain and some benches. But what it enables people to do is community members to come together, especially older people who really, you know, are struggling with social isolation, who don't want to be meeting up in indoor spaces. It's somewhere where you can go, and it's not intimidating or strange to go up to someone and have a chat if your dogs are playing or there. How easy is that to do? And yet it gives the, you know, and actually to be able to let the community influence if that's the sort of thing they want. It's those sort of easy wins that I like the most, I must admit. And obviously it's great when you have the projects where, you know, the community have tangibly impacted the sort of transport strategy or the sustainability. That's a big thing where you get sort of amazing like clean energy initiatives going ahead just because of the community really pushing for that and that being their priority. But I also think the small scale wins that you can have for a community are in a way just as powerful because it's something tangible.
Yeah, that's it. And like David mentioned, we had mentioned Richard earlier with the kitchen, it's such a simple thing, a small win, but we saw the huge impact it has. So it's wonderful. So we've talked about some of the schemes that have been failed to be embraced. We've talked about some of the wonderful community-led engagement work that you guys are firsthand getting involved in, and that's great. But for those of us maybe on the calls from clients, contractors, whoever we may be working for, we want to know, well, what's there for us? What tools are there to help us to support our community engagement better? Maybe Polly, if you could come in on this one and really help us to understand the type of tools that are there to support this community engagement to perform it to a better standard.
Well, if we're talking very specific tools with young people, there's a really, really good tool that I recommend everyone looks up, which is called Voice Opportunity Power, which is an engagement toolkit created by Grosvenor Estates, I think, with a group of other people all pretty experts in that field. So look that up. There's a lot of free information. There's a lot of free tools out there. But what I would really say clients, contractors, developers is don't be afraid to work with people in the community, seek the right people out, because I mean, I know from my experience of being an architect and working for big developers and clients, there are a lot of people in communities who literally will hate whatever you do, even if it's what they asked for on the last, the last thing. But those are the people who have a lot of time and energy to put into this and not much else going on in their lives. There are an awful lot of the community who don't have as much time, who are much harder to reach, as Savannah's pointed out all the things. I completely agree with everything she said about how you engage, and don't be afraid that people are going to ask to make your scheme more expensive or suddenly make you not as profitable, because actually you might save an awful lot of money not having to pay that big PR bill, because you've got evidence from an organization like ours who are infinitely cheaper, I can guarantee you, and you won't have to have that massive legal bill when you have to fight your planning rejection or whatever. Invest early and invest wisely is what I would say. And there are a lot of people in communities who know their communities, and they're not all out just to condemn people coming in making change, because actually sometimes the people who are going to benefit from that change don't have the opportunity to voice their opinions about it.
Yeah, that's it. Thank you. So it goes back to what Richard said at the start, didn't he, about the expertise that we have access to. It's an effort to engage it, but the positive change and how it's so valuable to have that patience and put the energy in. Maybe Megan, did you have some thoughts on this one about some tools that are available to help support community engagement?
Yeah, and I think the interesting thing, if you think about post-pandemic kind of world and the tools that the pandemic brought forward, these virtual rooms and the sort of online consultation platforms, and I think things where people can access it via their phones, there's a real place for that to be there, and something which really, really accessible. But I also think a mix, having, both the physical and the virtual events, making sure that we don't lose sight of all those ways to be able to engage with people. And I think throughout all of those, making sure that any platform you use, any sort of tools there are, you have to make sure that you have a purpose to them. Why, what are you going to do with the information, so people can really see that you're listening, which obviously has been highlighted so many times today. I think the other bit for me is that I would, encourage using your local authorities and using the local groups that the local authorities can sort of pick you, put you in touch with. I think don't shy away from being able to use your local authorities as a tool. We have some really remarkable people that work within local authorities, and this is our, these projects tend to be our legacy. There are communities we're there for the long run. We want to make sure that we're developing out things with them. So I think that's a tool that's probably not used enough, is being able to engage directly with your local authority and let them sort of be part of that conversation.
Yeah, that's brilliant. Thanks for that, Megan. We all hate when we're not being listened to. So we know exactly how the people that actually live in the areas where we're doing these works must feel. And maybe finally, with your experience, especially within the London area and the work you do, David, do you think there's any further tools that we're not really taking advantage of that we could?
Yeah, there's loads of tools. I mean, I'm not sure if it is, you've described as a tool, but I'd like to do a shout out for kind of community development trusts, of which, I mean, this is kind of referring back to what we were talking about earlier about locally embedded organizations. So there are these kind of organizations that are kind of quite local and maybe either established and long established, and their business is about kind of continuously engaging with the community, not on a start-finish basis. And there are also, I mean, there's an example of an outfit in London Development Trust, which is kind of specifically making it their business to engage with new teams around London to develop community development trusts alongside the schemes. And going back to what colleagues were saying about, we are saying, invest the time and invest the resources in this, but also it doesn't always have to be, an additional investment, additional expense. And if you're teaming up with organizations like the ones I've described, there's often, savings are kind of leveraging external funding, which is something they're really good at, on the back of some sort of initial partnership involvement and leveraging, or should we say leveraging, or whatever, bringing in all that kind of expertise as well, that's kind of already embedded in those kind of organizations. I mean, there's loads of tools actually. If I can, I mean, we're not supposed to be plugging really, but on our website, Locality.org UK, or on our sister website, mycommunity.org UK, there's loads of tools and resources for community engagement. And then my final thought on it really is, and again, Richard mentioned that it's sort of the impact measurement tools that are available. I mean, Tom's commonly used. I think probably most people on the webinar know about them, but there are other tools as well. And what we've been doing through the fund actually is working with the grantees on a very sort of, because they kind of tend to be quite small organizations, on a very sort of simplified version of getting people up to speed on how to really demonstrate and evidence their social impact and their social value. Yeah, those are some thoughts from myself.
Thank you. Well, we've let him get away with not saying much on the panel, but we're now going to take advantage of having Richard here as director of Wilmot Dixon, because there's a really good question that we're just going to ask as our final question as part of our panel discussion. I'd really like your thoughts on this, Richard, with your experience. What's the one thing that you wish a client would do differently when they engage and consult?
I wanted to have two, but we'll go for one.
We can let you have two.
No, it's fine. I think we've talked a lot here about collaboration, and I think it's really important. There is a real challenge in our sector sometimes about what is collaboration, and I'll leave that for a completely separate debate. But if there is one thing, contractors, developers, actually everyone works to a contract. At some point, it is defined what you must do. And the example I often use is I've done quite a lot of BREEAM rated buildings. And you always read a line in a contract, and it used to say really clearly, we aspire to BREEAM outstanding, but we'll do with BREEAM very good. And guess what we did? Everyone built loads of BREEAM very good buildings because aspiration was not a good term. And I think we almost have the same here with social value. Something like, we aspire to delivering outstanding social value, but we don't clearly define what needs to be done. And I think my call to arms, the appeal, is when you're at business case. So this is when you are thinking about what your project is. Bring in those local teams, bring in your community asset people, whatever we want to call that title, bring them in and get them to explain what the best outcomes could be. And then define that in collaboration during your soft market testing, during that early engagement, to define what you're going to ask for, and then put that in your tender documents for your consultants, for your contractors, for your facilities managers, for everyone that's going to be involved. Put that in, and then it will be delivered, and then it will get better, and you'll have then you'll have great examples. So that's where it starts. It's when, working with locality, it's working with these great organizations, get them in at the beginning, get your business case sorted, and then write that into everyone's contract. And then we're cooking. It's not difficult. It's just hard. It's hard.
Yeah, exactly. It's the effort.
We do what we've always done. And how did I procure that building? Oh, I did that, and that. Fine. Put that in the next one. And then we lose the opportunity, and that's sad. That's sad. But we can do it.
Yeah, and it's great to hear that one of our appointed contractors and a well-known contractor that we know, Wilmot Dixon, are embracing this. We know, along with others, we also have examples of yourselves on the panel of organisations that are willing to put this into hand, and that we can call to action. It's not just an aspiration, is it? So maybe very briefly, David, what would you say is one thing that you wish that was done differently in consultation engagement?
I might be slightly segueing from Richard, but early stage engagement with a long trusted community organisation or community hub as a development and engagement partner, I would say.
Yeah, that's it. And maybe Charlotte, finally.
Yeah, and from the point of view of an organisation that's all about getting young people into jobs within the industry, we want to know what that skills gap is going to be. What is going to be that local opportunity? We've got the long-term relationships with our schools and colleges, with our young people in the community. So we want to know what we need to start prepping them for, what experiences, what skills, what do we need to get them excited for, so that when the job opportunity's there, the young people go, yeah, I've been working for it. and we're really able to connect them, not for it to come up out of the blue and everybody goes, oh no, they all wanted to do this instead. It's absolutely that knowledge and that transparency so that we can make full advantage of those long-term relationships we have in the community.
Fantastic. Thank you all so much for you. Oh, sorry, go on, Savannah. We'll let you.
I was just going to add on to that. I think something that I would like to see more of is actually involving the community at a much earlier stage in a development project. I mean, pre-planning app stage, great, but I actually think that before even anyone, you know, submits a sort of tender, it should be for a new project, it should be, we've done a temperature check with the community, and what they really value is heritage, or what they really value is actually green space, and therefore our proposed design incorporates this into it. It shouldn't be something that comes at like as a comms stage, you know, to try and as like a sort of almost like to prevent crisis management. It should be something that comes so much earlier, when everything can still be influenced, right? If you think of it like a traffic light system, before anything is read, well, this is already decided, that's when you want the community engagement to start.
Lovely, thank you. Thank you all so much for engaging with us so much. So what we're going to do now is really show action in place. We're going to hand over to Megan Carter from Portland is going to take us through the Portsmouth City Council case study to show us how this is in action.
Afternoon all, thank you for having us. So I am Megan Carter. I'm Head of Major Projects at Portsmouth City Council. I've been at Portsmouth for about 3 years. We've got a multi-billion-pound programme of transformation taking place across the city, and it's a really exciting time for us as a city. I'm here to tell you today a little bit about some engagement work that we've done for one of our large-scale regeneration schemes, but I'll also be dropping in various other bits here, there and everywhere, and I've got 20 minutes, so I'm going to try and stick to time. I think the bit for me around engaging with the obviously, you know, why shouldn't we be? This should really be standard stuff. This should be stuff that, you know, is shouted about all over the place, and really great community engagement. I think it should be the backbone of any developments that you're bringing forward. It's a really key piece, but it is bizarre, isn't it, that it's something that's seen as quite a sort of radical, you know, thing, where it should just be the norm. It should just be something that is embedded within every scheme. Next slide, please. My Chris Whitty. So Portsmouth, for those of you who may not know, Portsmouth is a really fantastic city. It is, majority of our city is an island city. We are the only island city in the UK. We are the most densely populated city outside of London. We are home to the Royal Navy for over 500 years. We have obviously quite a strategic position throughout history, so we have a really rich heritage throughout the city. We have an incredible port that is growing, a local authority owned port. It is home to many cruise liners now, is expanding and redefining what a green marine port should look like. So really interesting businesses coming out of there. We're starting to sort of be recognised as the centre, global sort of centre for maritime technology, aerospace and defence, advanced manufacturing, but really starting to see a lot of creative and digital industries starting to come out across the city. And we're starting to see through a lot of our heritage work and sort of the cultural piece that we're doing, that the city's starting to really start to burst with sort of literature and the arts and the creative industries. So it's a really, it's an amazing place, and I do encourage you all to come down to the sunny south coast and visit our amazing city. We are, being an island, we do have a lot of constraints. Obviously, we have some significant challenges when you're looking at large scale regeneration, which obviously we are. And the site that you can see in front of you, you come in over the bridge, and on that right hand side there is a site called Tipner West. It's one of our most challenging sites. It's a very complex site, but as you can see from the image, it's also a little bit of a blank canvas. It's the gateway to our city. It's a really interesting piece of infrastructure. So I am going to talk you through kind of some of the engagement that we've done around this site, and all of you picking up on how early we should be doing this. We are at the really early stages of understanding sort of what this could be. Next slide, please. So the site has a capacity for anything from 1,250 homes to over 3,500. We really wanted this site because it is a relatively blank canvas. There's no excuse to not do something quite phenomenal here. It really could look at the way we live, future living in a whole different way. We don't have to hook up to any existing infrastructure. We can start afresh. We can look to what life might be like in the next 20 years and make sure that this site can accommodate it. So it's a really interesting, unique piece of land. we've had local artists. The image you see here is sort of local artists working up what we could do here, how it would look being here, and what sort of spaces we could create. And this was all about being a future focused regeneration, which we look at across all of our sites in Portsmouth. It really has become sort of the sort of the lifeline of what we're looking at. Everything has to be looking at those future trends, those accelerated trends, and what our city could look like what the world could look like actually in the next 10, 15, 20, 100 years, and making sure that we're fit to deal with that. Next slide, please. The bare minimum on this site is all centered around a really interesting, unique piece of maritime employment. So those of you who know the South Coast, and those of you who don't, we are really the home to quite a remarkable industry in the maritime sector. We also have a need for more, and that industry is growing both locally, nationally, internationally. And this site was identified as one of the very, very unique sites that could provide full tidal access and really provide quite a quantum of maritime employment, encouraging industries that are developing technologies all across the UK. Actually, those technologies then need to be put onto the waterfront. So this could be autonomous vessels, this could be technologies that make ships, more sustainable. And the maritime industry is really looking at how they can become a really green, future-proof piece. And this site enables us to accommodate that. There'll be over 4,000 jobs potentially on this site, and they will be anything from super yacht repair and refits, all the way down to developing, like I say, these really incredible technologies which will redefine the way the maritime industry functions. So we have a really unique opportunity on this site to look at this sort of maritime employment piece. Portsmouth has suffered in the past from the loss of shipbuilding in our city, and we have a real problem with actually young people now not knowing what their future holds. Their parents, their grandparents, their great-grandparents all used to be in this kind of maritime industry. So for us to be able to provide something like this in Portsmouth, we're really trying to encourage young people to be a part of it. And that was kind of where it started, that we wanted these young people to have these jobs. This was really important for us, that the schools now were kind of set up to have these jobs. Next slide, please. This started for us when we went to really high-level consultation. So we're talking, blobby maps, even for adults. All we did was draw a really artistic kind of sketch of the site and said, okay, here's a bunch of stickers. What would you want? Would you want eating here? Would you want, bike racks here? Really high level, like you have a blank canvas here. What would you want us to do? And we really struck us actually, because we wanted our future generations, our future residents to be taking these jobs. How are we going to engage with them and acknowledging, parents come into consultation events or roadshows or whatever, and they have kids with them, and how do we kind of get those kids engaged? And it's always seen as something really complicated, and why would young people engage with a roadshow? But what we did was we made everything kind of child height. We made all of our boards kind of at that height, so young ones could sort of reach, and the first thing they would see is something that was addressed to them. This is myself and a colleague actually just sitting on the floor with this little girl talking about the sort of job she'd like to do. And on one side of the paper was blue jobs, things to do in the water, and then on one side of the paper was green jobs, and you were able to sort of draw what you wanted to. And behind us there is an easel where we just put a picture of the site, and it was really amazing what kids drew on there. And I think partly the perception where people don't want to engage with the younger generation is they think, well, they don't understand, they're just young, they're going to come up with something completely radical, we can't possibly do that. It's simply not the case. The biggest thing we had when we looked at all the drawings that kids had done for us was actually they wanted to be able to access their grandparents. So that wasn't radical at all. But it was a reminder to us as a developer that we really needed to make sure we had a community that was balanced, and that these kids wanted to be able to see their grandparents in a really sort of community driven way. They wanted to be able to take granny out for a walk, and that's not radical, that's not crazy, that's something that we should all be looking to do. Next slide, please. This kind of then, so we sort of started doing this, and we then got a bit further, and we started to look at the naming, we started to look at kind of the vision for the future, and we got kids all across the city and focus groups kind of drawing what they wanted us to do, what was important, what did they want to see. And things that came through was a real pride in their city and a pride in Portsmouth, the pride in the fact that we're a maritime city, loads of imagery around green and recycling. So it just started to give us a bit of an indication as to what they wanted to see us delivering for the future generations that are going to live there. Next slide, please. It was important for us to go beyond kind of the official process of planning and things like that, and the amount of consultation you should do. You should do loads, do it all the time, do it in everything that you're looking at. And because this was such a unique site where we felt that actually, if you were in a school and you were really young, you could see this site come all the way forward, and then you could end up getting a job on this site. So that was kind of why we wanted to start going to schools across all levels. It was really simple. I went to education colleagues within the local authority, and I represent Portsmouth as a developer. I went to our education colleagues and I said, look, I've got this thing. It's going to be huge for the city if we can get it off the ground. It's complex. It's going to go on for a very long time. What can you do? And within 24 hours, they had a group of SMEs looking at it, developing material. And now you can't go into a classroom in Portsmouth, particularly a geography classroom, where they do not know this scheme. This scheme has been embedded now within our curriculum. We have curriculum materials that we've developed within our own city, and we're hoping to push those out to other cities as well. So, and that was just me saying to education, I'm not an education professional. I don't, I'm not a teacher, but I knew that we had something that we could say, okay, we can give you loads of material, we can adapt it. What do you guys think as education people? How would you like to roll this out into schools? And actually, we started this just before the pandemic. And when the pandemic came, the schools were really grateful for some content that we could kind of just package up and go, there you go, you can chuck that out on a virtual platform. And it gave them something to sort of engage in. So it worked really well, but it wasn't overcomplicated. We just spoke to the authority about how they wanted to be able to do it. Some of the examples, we did a decision making. Whenever you bring forward a site like this, there's always so many different opinions. So what we did was we got a group of one of our colleges where we gave them all something they had to protect. So we had a group of heritage, they had to protect a heritage asset. We had the environmental group, they had to protect the environment. We had a employment group, we had a tourism group, and we basically gave them all these, like, you have to, whatever happens, you have to make sure that you're protecting your priority. And within 10 minutes of one group going, well, we're going to do this, we need to provide this number of homes, we need to do this amount of marine employment, that was it. Debate kicked off. That we had so many groups going, you can't do that because I'm trying to protect this. And it was a great way of getting them to see how complex sites come forward, really lively debate, getting them to sort of talk about all the different things. And that's life skills, being able to look at, manage a group of people that have different sort of views or things that are important to them within a group. And that was, because the development was so early on, we were able to say, look, this is what, this is the sorts of decisions we're having to face, and therefore what would you do and how would you address that? So I think, starting at that really high level is just a good example of that. Next slide, please. We are really lucky in Portsmouth to have a really amazing UTC, University Technical College. We've worked with both Year 10s and Year 13s in our UTC. And we basically, what we said was, look, we can do a term. And it varies. So obviously the teachers, they take over some of it, but we said, look, we can come in for every other week for an hour or whatever the schools really wanted, and they varied. And obviously some of it was virtual. So our Year 10 group that we worked with, we looked at a zero waste project that was completely virtual. These guys are our Year 13 students who were absolutely amazing. It was one of the best projects I've ever done with a school. And we started with them, this was their final year. We started with them looking at how robotics could support a car-free environment. So when we were talking about future trends and how people move, we've played with this idea of car-free and could this be sort of one of the largest car-free communities in the UK? And it felt like, these are the generation we're being told doesn't want to own a car. So we sort of put this to them as a challenge, and how could they enable that to be the case? How can we enable people to live without a car? My goodness, they did not challenge us. They were, and it was brilliant. That's exactly what we wanted. We as a design team assumed, okay, we've been told generations don't want cars. Is that true? And these guys came at it, their ideas and going, okay, but you need to be able to do this. We don't like this, and you can't put that there, and we don't. And it was fantastic that as a design team, we got that challenge from the people that we're saying want to live there. These guys designed a back buddy. It was drawn from some inspiration from robots in Japan that are being developed in order to, and they found all this out, this was not us, robots in Japan that are being developed to help disabled people shop. They were able to carry their shopping, so they're really empowered to be within, you know, their community and be able to go out and do things. So these guys designed the Portsmouth version of that. They talked about how they could brand it, they talked about how they could charge it, how it would follow you, how you would be able to use this sort of day to day, and they built one for us. So this is the start of their prototype. They were very proud when some of their initial materials came through. We had everything from sort of solar paneled bus lanes. We had some hydrogen experiments that happened about how we could do hydrogen taxis across the water. And it was one of the best things. We built a real relationship with these kids over a term, and you know, we did some sessions for them on how to present. So at the end of their term, we got some counsellors in, we got various other sort of senior members of the organisation in, where these guys had to sell their idea about how they would enable a car-free life. The teachers at the UTC were phenomenal. They really sort of supported it. We sort of, you know, would send them various bits of information, but they really ran with it, you know, with us having to actually do not a lot. It wasn't really too demanding on us. Once you gave them the idea and gave them the sort of initial material, that was it. They kept going. Next slide, please. Year 10s, this was all virtual, looked at reducing plastic waste. So how could you create a plastic waste community? As I said previously, our site is a relatively blank canvas. So how could we make something that from the start we could say, okay, this is plastic free? And I think we had some again, some amazing ideas. And again, not too radical. You know, we were talking about reducing waste. So it started being plastics, and then it became a zero waste community. And one of the groups came up with, okay, well, they acknowledged that they had loads of like play equipment, so essentially skate parks and things like this. And they said, okay, well, you need to put lighting under everything so that we could grow our own vegetables. Yeah, that's a great shout. You know, why not? That's something that maybe, you know, why couldn't we do something like that? And that's them acknowledging that actually they've got a lot of things where they could grow vegetables and things like that underneath. They talked about having all refillable shops and being able to have a point system on your phone where you would be able to get a free refill of pasta every 3 weeks or something if you'd refilled, you know, various different points. Compost bins. They talked about intelligent waste collections. They talked about having water touch points across the site, so you wouldn't have to have plastic bottles, that people could really easily refill their water bottles. And sort of how you would incentivize people to do this. They really acknowledged very early on that you can't force people to live like this. So how would they want to do that? What would they do? And it was just another really great example of kind of getting young people involved in developing a community. Next slide, please. Portsmouth's a sticky city. We have a lot of people that stay once they go to university in Portsmouth, and our Portsmouth University is well and truly on the rise. It's a really phenomenal university, and loads of great stuff going on. We wanted to work with the university really early on and sort of give them, and this was very much, we very much just gave them an idea of what we wanted, and they kind of ran with it. Again, you know, busting that myth that this doesn't have to be really, really time consuming for everybody. These are small things that actually, if you give these people something to run with, they will go for it. They really do embrace having sort of topics like this. And this was something where they could see the site. It was, you know, it was in our city. They could see what they were going to create. And this was looking at a bridge that connected the site to a site over the water on the other side of the island. And they were able to develop that out for us. So that was a really exciting piece of work that we did with the university. Again, just picking up on this point, we've gone right back to as well the little ones at school, excuse me, and what they want to see in their community. And they talked about bus lanes, cycle lanes, green infrastructure. Again, it's not radical stuff, but you're involving them from such a, you know, an early stage that it makes it really important for your sort of future developments that they've been involved right from that, you know, that concept becomes theirs. And when they're applying for jobs on the site, that's really quite a remarkable story to tell for our city. That's my final slide. So yeah, thank you for having me today. I think my sort of closing comments are very much around, it's not overcomplicated. Engage with the, you know, your local schools and get involved. They're really keen to sort of work with you, and it's been a really remarkable and really quite rewarding experience for me to sort of be a part of all this this local engagement.
Thank you so much, Megan. That was brilliant. Really shows us some of the great work that is actually happening at the moment and gives us some really wonderful ideas of things that we can do. I think most importantly, what the webinar really shows us is the benefits of collaborating amongst each other and sharing the work that we're doing, because it gives us wonderful ideas for ourselves. So with this in mind of seeing the wonderful things that are happening, the wonderful things that we want to do, we're now going to ask Savannah to take us through to give us a view on an innovative, I always struggle with that one when I don't put my teeth in, community engagement tool. So we'll ask Savannah to take us through this, please.
Thank you. Can you see my screen okay?
We can.
Yeah. Perfect. Yeah, so give my view, the goal of what we're trying to achieve of it is to try and combat the challenge where the vocal minority, who typically tend to be, retired white middle-class professionals, dominate most conversations when it comes to decision making. And like I said earlier on the panel, it's not apathy that stops other demographics engaging. That's not why we have a silent majority. It's because they think, what's the point? And also, I don't have the time nor the inclination. Imagine that you get home from work, you sit down on the sofa, you see that flyer that's come through the door asking you to town hall meeting. You're exhausted. You have 2 kids running around in front of you. You actually really would like to go and have a say, because it's for a lot on the end of the street, and it could have public space, and you're desperate for a playground because at the moment you have to get on the bus and travel 10 minutes to take your kids to a playground. However, there's just no chance you're going to go to that town hall meeting tomorrow night at 5 p.m. However, imagine if instead what you could do is, whilst you're making a cup of tea or you're waiting the next morning at the bus stop to get the bus to work, within the space of 3 minutes, you could have a meaningful say on that project. And you could actually share that your priority for that space, your preference would be to have a playground there in the public realm. It just completely transforms the ability for people from more diverse backgrounds to engage and to do so meaningfully without feeling like they have to be incredibly articulate or have incredibly strong opinions or go out of their way, their daily routine, in order to have an impact on decisions that are going to impact where they live, they work, they play, they learn. And that's really what we've tried to do with Give My View. And the way to achieve this, the way to transform community engagement so that it becomes an actual change-making tool, is with 4 sort of key ingredients. 1 is you make it quick. You also make it fun. Number 3, you make it easy. And then the last most important one is make it impactful. If it's a foregone conclusion, if the community can't actually genuinely influence anything, you're going to miss out on all those people who are receptive to change. And so the way we do this is we aim to have meaningful engagement take place in less than 3 minutes. So normally a typical user would click on one of our social media ads or a QR code from a flyer, and they would be taken through to engage in a series of sort of like highly interactive sort of survey or heat mapping questions. And every time they answer a question, they gain more points. So this gives them that sort of endorphin rush as they go. And at the end, they then get to choose one of 3 hyper-local social initiatives to give those points towards. And after that, they can go and peruse timelines, news feeds, you name it. Now, the reason that we have this gamification is so that even if what you choose actually doesn't fall amongst what the majority of people prioritize or are concerned about, and therefore doesn't get actioned, we still build that trust, because still just by giving your time, you're doing something positive in terms of a contribution to your community. And it goes back to what people were saying earlier, which is, value young people's times with money. Well, here's an example of, our clients will set aside a pot of money or volunteering hours, whatever it may be, and they are still valuing these community members' times by saying it's worth your time. We want to make it worth your time. We value it, and we will actually act in accordance with what you prioritize. So the way we go about doing this, I'm going to be very quick because I'm conscious of how much time I have, is firstly these dynamic surveys that make it really quick and easy and fun for people to engage. And what's super important here is that, as I sort of mentioned on the panel, you pre-qualify the options you put on here as one of our clients before you do so. And the reason why is because of actually the grounding we have in behavioral psychology. So in behavioral psychology, there's something called the IKEA effect, which is a cognitive bias in all humans that means that if you have helped to build or create something, you place more value on the end result. You're more emotionally invested in it than if actually something of equal, good quality is given to you or you just see it. You need to be part of that process to develop that attachment to it. And that's what we really try and achieve here. So imagine for a second, you're at home. Think about your own neighborhood. And I want you to imagine, you know, sort of something that you really would like to see there, that you really want improved or delivered. And tomorrow you wake up, you walk outside and down the street, and there it is, it's right there. That's great. But imagine if it's right there because you had taken the time and you had been empowered to say what was most needed, what you most wanted to see improved or added. That's why it's there. It just doubles the impact for a community and gives them that sense of empowerment that is so sorely lacking for so many demographics in our society. And that's why what we also do is we go beyond just sort of, you know, the sort of, I suppose, the surveys, which is around, yes, this is my priority, or no, this isn't my concern. And we actually try and take it one step further for co-design. So if you think of the presentation we've just seen and the idea of putting those stickers on, you know, sort of, yes, I'd like to see bike parking here, we essentially have created a animated digital version of this, where you'd be able to say, drag and drop, this is where I think it would be really valuable to have bike parking. Or actual co-design, you know, from a pre-qualified list of all the different things that are financially sort of feasible for the council to put in the public realm space, you would actually be able to drag and drop, I would like to see a water feature here. And you can comment if you want, but one thing that's really important for us is that we make sure that all comments are only actually seen by the decision maker. Because whilst there's definitely times when actually having open comment forums is valuable. Again, in behavioral psychology, what that means to anyone who is not from a privileged, articulate, you know, sort of minority, is that it can really actually be prohibitive for people feeling like they can actually have their say and raise their voice. And also it leads to something called like clunking, where basically if you see a negative comment, it immediately influences what you're going to write as well. And so what we do actually is that, yes, it could be for co-design, but it can also be as a listening exercise, where completely anonymously, without having to, you know, sort of worry about what other people, you know, in the community are going to think when they read your comment, you're able to annotate a map or an image with different sort of icons. So this is an example of one that we've done recently as a listening exercise for a council, where it was a women's safety. So non-binary, sort of as well as trans and cis women were able to annotate a map of the local area saying where they don't feel safe at night. And they could also then leave comments attached about why they don't feel safe there. And it's still live, but to date, I think the council have had over 1,300 annotations of this map. And the most, you know, sort of disturbing but valuable trends of around bus stops, around you know, sort of the tube, where people are mostly, you know, sort of reporting feeling really unsafe at night. And then it actually raises questions around, okay, people are demanding they need more car parking. Do they actually need more car parking, or do they need to feel safer on their streets so that they feel they can walk to the tube or wait at the bus stop without worrying about being assaulted or harassed? And so that's the sort of insight where I want you to think about community engagement as not just being when you need to have a formal consultation, but actually an ongoing relationship where you're able to listen and iterate on the insight you get from your community, as well as being able to, you know, have them engage on their own terms. For people with learning difficulties, actually, it can be very intimidating having to either articulate in front of a crowd of people in person, or to write a comment about how they feel about something. But if you let people actually intuitively respond to a design they see, you get to have a lot more breadth of opinions. And we make sure that this is also possible by doing it in up to 14 languages. So actually letting people, again, engage on their own terms. And those social media campaigns that we run in order to let people find out about this opportunity in the local area, we do those in multiple languages as well, those whole campaigns. It's giving a very clear message that we want to hear from you. You matter. Whoever you are in this community, you matter, and we want to listen to you and engage with you and have you be a change maker. So the last thing we do is have community information hubs. It's really important for building that trust to keep going back to the community, whether it's an interactive news feed, whether it's the timeline, you know, updating on this is what you influence. It's not enough just to gather that data from what a community's preferences, priorities, and concerns are. What you need to then do actually is tell them how this has enabled you to make data-driven decisions, how they've had a tangible impact. Let them feel that sense of pride and empowerment. The result when you do all of this is phenomenal. So on average, our local community engagement projects get 2,000 community respondents. And it's not like they go on there and just answer one question. On average, there's 19,000 contributions by those 2,000 community members. And we've calculated, based on all the case studies online, that this is 3,600% more contributions versus other digital platforms when they're doing, you know, comparable projects. And you also get a lot of people just having project views, engaging with that news feed, with those timelines, actually just wanting to understand more around these projects. And this can happen for, you know, a wide range of projects you can use this on. It's not just actually for when you have a particular development to discuss. It can be around how you allocate NSIL. It can be for your, you know, sort of your climate action strategy, your transport strategy, just engaging that community on long-term, I suppose, topics that are going to have an impact on them. I'm just going to finish quickly with one case study, which is I chose our latest project, which is still live. So these are the sort of a snapshot of what it looks like today. However, it's still ongoing with more people engaging every minute. So I thought what was interesting here is firstly, the phenomenal amount of engagement they've had, over 10,000 community contributors and 159,000 contributions for their local plan. So this is a local plan, it's their phase one. So they'll keep going back to these, you know, sort of 10,000 plus contributors to take them on that journey. The first step, as you know, I'm actually going to quickly jump off to show you the sort of questions they're asking. The walking and cycling routes are safe and attractive. Letting people actually have that say and give that quick response to how they feel about it. Just like a couple of examples, just to give you context for you to help you visualize this. And so we make it so easy, but actually while still gathering that insight that you need, is that most people do just do it from their smartphones. So 74% are doing it from their phones. But what's important is even though it looks and feels like an app, it's not. It's got to be accessible, because 23% of people were doing it from their desktop and another 3% from tablets. So that's also valuable there. We use sort of like machine learning, something called natural language processing, so that all these qualitative answers, we can do an automatic sentiment analysis on it. There's lots of cool tools out there like that to help you. But I thought I just wanted to finish with what's really important to see is that, yes, these tools are great for engaging younger people. However, not just younger people, actually. The reason there's so few under the 18 to 24, by the way, is because for a project like this, where we've primarily targeted through social media, you don't want to target people under 18, just for like ethical reasons. So people under 18, this is probably where their parents have done it, if they said, hey, you should do it as well. But what we're seeing here is actually 55 to 64 and 45 to 54 are our two highest engagement categories. And actually increasingly what we're seeing creeping up is the 65 plus, the 75 plus, because of, as a result of COVID, people have had to learn to use smartphones and use this technology in order to stay connected with their loved ones. And that has a really valuable actually impact in terms of being able to engage everyone, for this to be an inclusive use of technology. And then finally, actually seeing how even the gender split can be as well. And much more so than what you often find when you use traditional means alone of engaging with people. And I'm going to finish there because that is, I've gone over by 2 minutes.
So, we'll let you off this once. No, it's worth the extra time because it's such a wonderful tool. We see it's something really good to think about for the future. And we've heard a couple of times talked of by everybody a call to action, a plan of action. And so with this in mind, we're going to invite our head of procurement, Shona Snow, to take us through the ADS and MDC frameworks that we have here at LHC.
Great, thank you, Tim. So yeah, it's just going to be a few minutes to remind everyone or to share with you a little bit about our ADS and MDC frameworks before we close out with the making of film of Engage the Future. So when we procured the Architect Design Services Framework, ADS, we were looking for more than just the same names that you always see on frameworks. We wanted traditional firms, traditional practices with resources, the experience, the capability in public sector, and those able to scale up quickly and deliver very large, complex schemes. We also wanted new and emerging practices, including micro SMEs, who bring innovation and a pioneering sense of design, as well as the experience. And quite often they are the practices that used to work at the larger practices and have left to set up on their own. But what we also wanted was diverse talent, and talent that is typically overlooked by traditional procurement methods. Those who have a different perspective, quite often from lived experience of social housing and local community contacts, networks. They're able to provide role models for young people to look up to from disadvantaged backgrounds. But most importantly, they bring fresh ideas and insight that is very rarely tapped into. So we did this through months of market engagement and bidder support, but also by designing a process that evaluated their equality, diversity and inclusion approach. So typically it would just be the design skills in a procurement process that's looked at. We looked beyond that at how they live and breathe EDI through their organisation, how that then informs the work that they deliver and how they design. And then a step beyond that, who they collaborate with, subcontract to, outreach to, advocate for, and what they're really doing to improve representation within their own profession. So we got a really good spread, and I can tell you, we've got some incredible talent. We've done a huge amount of groundwork in order to find these practices, and therefore our clients don't have to do that. So we've got OBE recipients, we've got ex-REBA vice presidents, got multiple award-winning practices. With the MDC framework, the Multidisciplinary Consultancy Services Framework, we approached it with a very similar philosophy, a clear objective to attract a range of micro, small and medium practices, as well as diverse consultancies who offer good social value credentials and seek to reduce inequalities within their own professions. So this time we took the approach of reserving spaces for micro SMEs across all disciplines and small enterprises as well, in order to open up competition and even the playing field. So they're qualified, they're experienced, they're well established. But for our clients for whom social value and local supply and a diverse supply chain are a priority, this could be a solution. So we have 7% BAME-led practices, including 5 Black-led consultancies. These are consultancies that are not frequently able to access frameworks normally, just because of the arbitrary criteria that kind of blocks them out. So we've made this as flexible as possible. We have a good range of sizes, very collaborative as well. And also a sustainable approach to the way it's been set up, so that it encourages growth of these practices over the next 6 years. So if you do want to find out any more about these frameworks, who we've appointed, how to use them, please get in touch with our team, with Bobby, Erez, Sam and Paul, who would be happy to take any questions.
That's fantastic. Thank you, Shona. I would also like to mention that Shona's the one that put all the hard work of this webinar together and organised everything. I just had the glory job of emceeing and introducing everyone. So I'd like to thank Shona for all our hard work in putting this together. Also, along with our speakers and everybody that partook, we had Richard Davidson from Wilmot Dixon, Polly, from We Rise, Meg from Portsmouth City Council, Charlotte from Construction Use Trust, David Outquist with us from Locality, and Savannah de Savory from Build ID. Just finally, further to thanking everyone for their participation, we really hope that you enjoyed the information that we was able to put together. It really shows some wonderful work that's going on, some really good aspirations that we have for the future. But as we've mentioned, aspirations are nothing unless we actually put these plans in place. So with that in mind, if you'd like any further information from anything that we've spoken about today, as Shona said, please do get in contact with any of us at the team at LHC. We will more than happily help you or point you into the direction of some of the organizations that we've featured. And we really do appreciate you taking the time to spend with us and share the information with us. Just further, there was a couple of questions about the slides and the recording. For all of those that are registered for today's webinar, you will get an email with the slide deck and also a link to the recording, so you can share to your colleagues should you wish. So without further ado, we'll just thank you all once again, everybody, for your attendance. And to close our webinar, we're going to play out the making of our film, Engage in the Future. Thank you all once again.
Perfect, thank you.
The brief for this project is very much about architecture. We want the audience to feel inspired when they've watched this film. We want them to feel excited at making greater efforts to involve young people when schemes are designed. Design is meant to be inclusive.
We are the architects of the future.
I've come to this work experience today because I'm interested in going into architecture. One thing I've learned is how buildings can shape an environment and the local community around them, and why that's so important to be designed correctly.
I was thinking about how I want my house to look like. I wanted it to be a green space, but like eco-friendly.
So if you think about the kind of buildings that we're talking about, public spaces, parks,
community areas, theatres, schools, offices, libraries, etc. They're all supposed to be publicly accessible and accessible to all. And there is quite often this idea in public sector, build this amazing thing and the people will just come. And that's not always what happens. And a lot of that is down to how they've engaged with local communities, the people that they want to have use that facility.
We brainstormed a sentence for each scene that was concise enough for each part, and then we wrote it down into like a large script for the whole film.
We worked with Catherine, who was a professional director of photography. The whole filming and planning process, everything about this work experience was very, very social, and it was very interactive with everybody, and it really gave me a lot of insight into what I could be doing in the future. Working with Nathaniel was very skill enhancing and very engaging, as he helped us. He asked us what we liked, scenes that we liked, what we thought was right.
What was really lovely to see was how they worked together as a team. They collaborated together, they were creative together, consulted with each other, and made sure each one of them had a voice, had a part to play in the production of the film. And effectively, that's what they're telling the audience to do. They're saying everybody should have a voice. And I like the fact that they were living that through the production of the film.
What really surprised me with what's been achieved is just the professional finish that we've seen, how that it was really on message, answered exactly the brief that we were looking for.
We Rise is a very supportive organisation, and they seem to be very well in touch with young people, and they seem to want to help us a lot.
It's so important to engage with the community well, and to engage with not just the ones that shout loudest, but actually the ones that maybe are a little bit quieter, a little bit harder to reach. And part of that is actually engaging with young people.
Communication is very important, especially between architects and the people they're going to build for, and how big of a role it plays in the future of buildings.